Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be tackling something pretty powerful. We're going to be taking a look at Brianna Wiest's book, The Mountain Is You. Have you heard of this one?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's a really fascinating look at this concept of self-sabotage. And she uses this metaphor of a mountain to represent all these internal obstacles, the things that keep us from reaching our full potential.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and when I first saw the book, even just those chapter titles, Fear of Success, Reprogramming the Mind, I was like, whoa, I have to read this. I mean, who isn't a little afraid of success?
It's not just about identifying those obstacles, though, right? What makes this book so impactful, I think, is that she really dives into the why. Why do we have these things? And then she gives us steps, actionable steps that we can take to overcome them. So it's not just about recognizing, oh, there's a mountain there.
Yeah.
It's about okay, how do I climb this thing?
Right. So we know what the mountain is. Let's set up base camp with chapter 1. Wiest lays out this idea that the mountain isn't like our job or our relationships. It's not even like the crazy pandemic we all went through. It's really these internal barriers that we create for ourselves, those unresolved issues and fears and those limiting beliefs that we have.
Yeah.
Those are the real roadblocks.
Yeah, it's right from the start. She shifts that focus inward. Instead of blaming all these external factors, she's like, no, you have to take responsibility for your own growth.
Which can be empowering, but also kind of daunting. It's like, wait, I can't blame my boss for being unhappy. It's me.
Exactly. That's where the work begins, right?
So let's talk about some of those fears. In chapters 2 and 3, she dives into two that seem completely contradictory. Fear of change and fear of success. Wait, how can we be afraid of both?
I know it's one of those things that sounds so illogical, but when you actually think about it, when you really dig deep, it makes sense. They both kind of come from this discomfort with the unknown. So change, it disrupts everything that's familiar, even if what's familiar isn't actually serving us very well. And then success. Success brings all this new pressure and these new expectations.
Yeah, so it's like we're afraid to stay the same, but we're also afraid of what might happen if we actually achieve the things that we want. Like, no wonder we feel stuck.
Yeah, it's totally better the devil you know. We cling to what we know, even if it's not good for us, because at least it's predictable. And then with success, we might worry about failing on an even bigger scale.
Right.
Or not being able to live up to these new expectations.
Oh my gosh, I have totally been there. A few years back, I had this chance to take on this huge role at work. And on paper, it was like everything I thought I wanted. But I was terrified to do it. I almost backed out because it meant leaving this comfortable position I was in, even though it wasn't really fulfilling me. So Wiest is just totally spot on with this one.
Absolutely. But the important thing is she doesn't just leave us with the fear. She gives us a framework for moving through it. She challenges us to kind of reframe change as an opportunity for growth, to see success as a chance to evolve and become even more of who we're meant to be.
So it's about shifting that perspective from fear to possibility. I like that. Okay, so we've talked about these big existential fears, but what about those everyday habits that kind of trip us up? Wiest dives into a couple big ones in chapters 4 and 6. Procrastination and perfectionism. And I'm realizing there's a connection here. Procrastination is often about avoiding difficult tasks, and perfectionism is about setting these impossible standards that we're afraid to even start. So they kind of feed off of each other.
Yeah, that's such a good observation. And it's fascinating to think about the psychology behind these behaviors too. Like procrastination, it might be fueled by a fear of failure. If I never try, I can't mess up, right? And then perfectionism. That often comes from this need for external validation. Like we're so focused on what other people think that we're totally paralyzed by this fear of not being good enough.
So it's less about laziness or being controlling and more about these deeper insecurities that we're trying to protect.
That makes so much more sense.
Okay.
But knowing this is only half the battle, right? What does Wiest suggest we actually do about it?
Well, this is where she starts to give us these tools, things that we can use right now. And one thing she really emphasizes is breaking down these tasks. Breaking them down into smaller, more manageable steps. So instead of getting overwhelmed by this huge project, you just focus on conquering one base camp at a time.
Okay, so instead of staring at the summit, you're focusing on that next handhold.
Exactly. And then for perfectionism, she encourages us to challenge those unrealistic standards that we set for ourselves. Ask yourself, is this truly necessary? What would good enough look like? Oftentimes, we're holding ourselves to standards that nobody else even expects of us.
I know I struggle with that validation trap myself, the one she talks about in chapter 5. I get so caught up in what other people think. Is it really self-sabotage, though? Or do we need some of that feedback to actually grow?
That's such a good question, and I think it gets at the heart of her argument. While feedback can definitely be helpful, relying too heavily on that external validation can be a really slippery slope. It's about finding that balance between being open to feedback and staying true to your own values and your own instincts.
So it's not about shutting out all outside opinions, but making sure they aren't the only thing driving our decision.
Right. It's about cultivating that inner compass, that self-trust that allows you to make choices based on what feels right to you, even if it doesn't align with everybody else.
And that takes a lot of courage, especially in this world where we're constantly being told who we should be and what we should be doing. But that's where emphasis on action comes in, right?
Yeah.
She talks about that in chapter 7 and 12. Like, knowing all this stuff is great, but it's useless if we don't actually do anything with it.
Totally. Action is how we move through change. She reminds us that change is inevitable. It's part of growth. And by taking action, even small steps, we become active participants in shaping our own evolution. Okay, so we've covered fear and procrastination and perfectionism, that validation trap. You're starting to see why we called this episode Conquering Your Inner Mountain. But it gets even deeper than that. In chapters 8 and 9, Wiest really doesn't shy away from some of the heavier stuff, like the impact of past trauma and the importance of healing and self-love.
Yeah, this is where I think her perspective really shines through. She acknowledges that unresolved trauma can manifest as self-sabotage and fear and all these unhealthy coping mechanisms. It's like carrying extra weight on that climb, you know?
Right. And she's not just saying, hey, you have trauma, deal with it. She's emphasizing that healing from past trauma is a crucial step towards that radical self-love. It's about embracing ourselves fully, flaws and all, recognizing that we are worthy of love and belonging, even with our scars.
And that's not always easy. It can require professional help, working through difficult emotions, practicing self-compassion. But it's essential for breaking free from those patterns that aren't serving us anymore.
It's interesting how she connects these ideas of healing and self-love with this development of emotional intelligence, which she talks about in chapter 10. It's like these pieces all fit together to build this more resilient self.
What's fascinating is how emotional intelligence, or EQ, gives us the tools to not just understand our emotions, but to manage them. So it's about recognizing those triggers that lead to self-sabotage and developing strategies to respond in healthier ways, learning to navigate our emotional landscape with more skill.
So it's not about suppressing or ignoring our emotions. It's about mastering them.
Exactly.
That's a powerful image. And that leads us to one of the most intriguing concepts in the book, reprogramming the mind. She explores this in chapter 11.
This is where we get into how our subconscious beliefs can actually drive our behavior. And she argues that a lot of our limiting behaviors, they stem from these deeply ingrained beliefs that we've absorbed over time. Maybe it's childhood experiences or past relationships, or even just these societal messages that we've internalized.
It's like these beliefs become the default settings in our operating system.
Yeah.
They're running in the background, and they're influencing how we see the world and how we see ourselves. And if those settings are negative or limiting, no wonder we keep running into the same problems.
Exactly. But the good news is, we can change those settings.
Oh, tell me more.
We can reprogram our minds to be more supportive and self-affirming. And she suggests techniques like affirmations and visualizations and meditation to kind of rewire our thinking. It's about consciously choosing to install a new operating system, one that's designed for growth and success.
I love that. We're trading in that old clunky flip phone for a sleek, powerful smartphone.
Yes.
We're upgrading our mental hardware.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And ultimately, this all comes back to that power of taking action, which is the focus of chapter 12. She reminds us that knowledge and intention are important, but without action, nothing changes.
Right. It's about breaking through that analysis paralysis and taking those first steps, even if they're small. Showing up for ourselves consistently, day after day, and doing the work.
That's the essence of the mountain.
That's right.
It's about recognizing that our biggest challenges often lie within, but also that we have the power to overcome them. It's about becoming conscious climbers, aware of the terrain, equipped with the tools, and determined to reach the peak.
Man, I'm exhausted just thinking about all this inner climbing. But in a good way, of course.
It's definitely a journey.
Yeah.
But it's a rewarding one. And we're just getting started.
Before we go any further, though, let's take a moment to catch our breath and digest all this incredible information. We'll be right back to continue our deep dive into The Mountain Is You and explore how you can apply these insights to your own life. Stick with us.
Welcome back to our deep dive into The Mountain Is You. So we've been unpacking some pretty heavy concepts here, fear, self-sabotage, even the impact of trauma. But I don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed. Wiest doesn't just leave us with these challenges. She gives us some practical tools to actually work with. Yeah, that's so important. One thing she emphasizes throughout the book is this power of small, consistent steps. It's not about like these overnight transformations. It's about making daily choices that really align with our goals and our values. Just building momentum one step at a time.
Okay, so what does that look like in real life? Like, what are some examples of these small steps?
Well, it could be something as simple as choosing a healthier option for lunch or carving out 15 minutes to meditate, even when you're feeling super stressed. Or saying no to a commitment that, just doesn't align with your priorities. These small actions, when you do them consistently, they can create this ripple effect and lead to some really significant shifts.
Yeah, it's like the compound interest of personal growth. Small deposits over time lead to big gains. I think one of the things that makes Wiest's approach so relatable is that she acknowledges that this journey isn't always linear. Like, there are going to be setbacks. There are going to be moments of doubt. And times when we're tempted to go back to those familiar patterns, even when we know those patterns aren't healthy for us. So what do we do when that internal GPS keeps trying to reroute us back to that comfort zone, even when we know it's not where we want to be?
Yeah, we all have those moments, right, where we slip back into those old habits. But what Wiest reminds us is that those moments of resistance, those are actually opportunities for growth. They're chances for us to use those emotional intelligence muscles that we were talking about earlier.
So instead of beating ourselves up, we can look at these moments as data points. Like, okay, I noticed I fell back into that procrastination pattern. What triggered it? What can I do differently next time?
Exactly. Each time we choose the path of growth, even after we've had a stumble, we strengthen our resolve and we build resilience. It's like training for a marathon. You wouldn't expect to run 26 miles on your first try, right? There will be days when you don't feel like running, days when you hit a wall. But it's about getting back out there, learning from those setbacks, and gradually building your endurance.
That's such a good analogy, and it reminds me of something Wiest talks about in Chapter 7, about embracing change and moving forward. Change is inevitable. It's just a natural part of life. But it's our attitude towards change that determines whether it's a source of stress or a catalyst for transformation.
Yeah, if we resist change, we just create unnecessary suffering for ourselves. But if we can learn to embrace it, to see it as an opportunity for growth, then it becomes less about fear and more about possibility.
I love that. It's like shifting our perspective from I have to do this to I get to do this.
Exactly.
It's about seeing those changes, even the challenging ones, as chances to learn and to evolve and to become more aligned with our true selves.
Which brings us to one of the most important themes in the book, this idea of self-love, like that radical self-love that Wiest talks about in Chapter 9. It's the foundation for everything else.
Yeah.
If we don't love and accept ourselves, flaws and all, it's so hard to believe that we're worthy of change, worthy of growth, worthy of reaching those summits.
I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. We're so conditioned to focus on our flaws and compare ourselves to others and strive for this unattainable ideal of perfection. It's hard to break free from that negative self-talk.
It is hard, but it's not impossible. And Wiest gives us some really concrete strategies for cultivating self-love. One of the most powerful is challenging those limiting beliefs, those beliefs that keep us feeling unworthy. Ask yourself, is this belief really true? What evidence do I have to support it? Often when we examine those beliefs, we realize they're based on fear or insecurity or past experiences that don't even apply to us anymore.
It's like fact-checking our own thoughts. We wouldn't blindly believe everything we read online, so why do we give those negative thoughts so much power over us?
Right. And another important piece is shifting our self-talk to be more supportive and encouraging. So instead of saying, I'm not good enough, we can start saying, I am capable, or I am worthy of love and happiness. It might feel silly at first, but those small shifts in language can really have a profound impact on our beliefs and our behavior.
It's like we're slowly rewriting the script that's been playing in our heads for years. We're becoming the authors of our own stories.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And that's really what self-love is all about. Choosing to see ourselves through a lens of compassion and understanding and acceptance. Recognizing that we are worthy, regardless of our achievements or our appearance, or what other people think.
As you're saying this, I'm realizing that self-love isn't just about feeling good. It's about empowering ourselves to make choices that are aligned with our values and goals, creating a life that feels authentic and fulfilling.
Absolutely. When we cultivate self-love, it becomes easier to take risks, to embrace those challenges, and to bounce back from setbacks. We're no longer operating from this place of fear and scarcity. We're coming from a place of abundance and possibility. And that's when real growth can happen.
I love that.
Yep.
So we've talked about the importance of self-love, challenging those limiting beliefs, taking those small, consistent actions. What are some other key takeaways from The Mountain Is You that listeners can apply to their own lives?
One of the most important is self-awareness. And Wiest gives us a lot of practical tools for developing self-awareness, things like journaling or meditation, or even just taking a few minutes each day to reflect on your thoughts and feelings and experiences.
Oh, I'm a big fan of journaling. It's amazing how much clarity you can gain from just getting those thoughts out of your head and onto paper.
It really is. Yeah. And as we become more self-aware, we're better equipped to make decisions that are truly aligned with our authentic selves, to set healthy boundaries, and to create a life that feels really fulfilling. It's about recognizing those patterns that aren't serving us and making conscious choices to create new, healthier patterns.
So it's not just awareness for the sake of awareness. It's about using that awareness to actually take action and make positive changes.
That's it. It's about becoming the architects of our own lives.
You know, as we're talking, I keep coming back to that image of climbing the mountain. It's a reminder that this journey of personal growth might not always be easy, but it's so worth the effort.
It is. And one of the most important things to remember is that we don't have to climb alone. You know, there are resources and support systems and fellow climbers out there who can help us navigate those challenging terrains.
Yeah, sometimes all we need is a helping hand or a word of encouragement to keep us moving forward.
Exactly. As we reach new heights, we can turn around and offer a hand to those who are following behind. It's about building this community of support and encouragement as we all strive to reach our individual summits.
I love that. And as we've been talking about all these incredible insights from the book, I've been thinking about how they apply to different areas of our lives. You know, it's not just about personal growth in a vacuum. These principles can impact our relationships, our careers, our health, every aspect of our being. But before we get into that, let's take another quick break to gather our thoughts and prepare for the final leg of our climb. We'll be right back to explore how The Mountain Is You can help us navigate those specific areas of life. And we are back, ready to tackle the final stretch of our deep dive into The Mountain Is You. So we've covered a lot: understanding self-sabotage, cultivating self-love, emotional intelligence. But now I want to know how this all translates into real-life situations. How can we actually use these principles in our relationships, our careers, our overall well-being?
That's the question, isn't it? It's where the rubber meets the road. And I think one of the most powerful areas to apply Wiest's work is in relationships.
Oh, absolutely. So let's talk about that. How does understanding our own inner mountain help us navigate the ups and downs of romantic relationships, friendships, even family dynamics?
Well, it all comes back to self-awareness. When we understand our own patterns, triggers, needs, we're better equipped to communicate effectively and set those healthy boundaries.
That makes sense. So, for example, if I tend to get defensive in arguments, I can try to be more mindful of that and choose to respond differently.
Exactly. And when we're more self-aware, we're less likely to project our own insecurities or unresolved issues onto others. We can show up with more empathy and understanding.
So it's not about blaming the other person for our problems. It's about taking ownership of our own stuff and showing up as the best version of ourselves.
Yes. And when we do that, we attract those healthier, more fulfilling relationships. Wiest really emphasizes choosing partners and friends who support our growth. You know, people who challenge us to become our best selves.
Yeah, we've all had those relationships that drain our energy and keep us stuck in unhealthy patterns. So recognizing those red flags and making choices to surround ourselves with people who uplift and inspire us, that's so important.
It really is. And these same principles apply to our careers too. When we understand our strengths, values, passions, we can make better career choices.
So it's not just chasing the paycheck or trying to please other people. It's making choices that feel right for us, that align with who we are and what we want to contribute.
Exactly. And when we're doing work that feels meaningful and purposeful, we're going to be more successful and fulfilled. Wiest also talks about developing a growth mindset in our careers, embracing those challenges as opportunities to learn and grow.
I love that. I've always been drawn to jobs that push me outside my comfort zone and help me learn new skills.
And that's where those tools for overcoming self-sabotage come in. You can use those strategies to overcome procrastination, perfectionism, fear of failure, things that might be holding you back.
It's like we're building this toolkit for navigating all those career challenges and achieving our goals.
Exactly. And then finally, The Mountain Is You offers some really great insights for just improving our overall well-being. Wiest emphasizes things like self-care, stress management, cultivating a positive mindset.
I think that's so important these days. You know, it's easy to get caught up in the hustle and bustle and forget to take care of ourselves.
It's true. But self-care isn't selfish. It's essential for our mental, emotional, and physical health. It's about prioritizing those activities that nourish us and replenish our energy.
Like putting on our own oxygen mask first, before helping others.
Exactly. We can't pour from an empty cup. And when we prioritize self-care, we're so much better equipped to show up for ourselves, our loved ones, and the world.
This has been such an amazing conversation. We've explored so many powerful ideas and practical strategies for personal growth. As we wrap up our deep dive into The Mountain is You, what final message would you leave with our listeners?
I think the most important thing to remember is this. We all have mountains to climb. We all face challenges and setbacks. But we have the strength, the resilience, the resources to overcome them.
It's about believing in ourselves, even when it's hard, and embracing the journey, even when the path is uncertain.
Exactly. And as we continue on this journey of climbing and learning and growing, we discover that the view from the top is always worth it.
So well said. To all our listeners out there, keep climbing, keep exploring, never stop believing in your own incredible potential.
And until next time, happy climbing, everyone.